you very much for coming to our panel. Thank you for getting tickets. I'm going to do a little disclaimer. This panel is called I Am Too Sexy for This Book. There will be some slightly sexy content, as you may expect. If words like peenie and Lulu offend you, you may wish to calmly depart. I'm saying if that's going to upset you. So yeah, let's get cracking. Who have we got today? Obviously, I have written widely about sex in Being a Boy and This Book is Gay, but mine is non-fiction, so I'm completely off the hook, because when you're writing sex education, you can say whatever you like, because you know it's learning. But today we have got three fantastic authors who have written novels which have in some way explored the pitfalls and the passion and the brilliance that is sexy fun time. So let me introduce my esteemed colleagues. It's going to be that kind of panel, I'm afraid. So, to my left, we've got, first of all, an amazing best-selling author and recent winner of the Lancashire Book of the Year prize, Kat Clark, who has written 4 amazing, very gritty UK YA novels, Entangled, Torn, Undone, and most recently, A Kiss in the Dark, bravely deep. Next to her, we have the former editor of Catnip Books, who has since turned her attention to sexy fun time in novular form with the fantastic teen pregnancy drama, Trouble. And last but by no means least, we have, and you can say this so rarely, we have internet Wattpad sensation and the fantastic author of The Kissing Booth, Rolling Dice, and Out of Tune, and a princess of teen, it's Beth Riekels. Can we have a clap for everybody? Hooray! Now, this really is, let's just get me out of the way first, which I think is appropriate, because I think that's how a lot of men treat sex anyway. And we'll talk briefly about my novel, Say Her Name, which I will be signing later on. Say Her Name, this is a little story, was rejected in America because it had the idea of sex in. There was actually no sex in Say Her Name, but even the insinuation that sex might have happened 60 years ago was enough to worry Scholastic USA. So with this in mind, when writing sexy scenes, why risk going there at all? And we'll start with Kat.
Hi, can you hear me? Yes, good. Why go there? Why not? Is my answer to that question. It wasn't even a consideration.
Do you like sex, Kat?
I love it. Please don't put that on Twitter. Some teenagers have sex.
What?
Yes, this information is shocking. And if some teenagers do it, then chances are I'm going to write about it. I wasn't worried about doing it. It just wasn't an issue for me. I didn't even consider it. I think you should always go there.
Always go there. No, what about you?
Hello. Well, I wrote about sex because that's what I wanted to read about when I was 14. And like I always say, I wrote everything for 14-year-old non. And 14-year-old non was A, horny, and B, curious. So that's kind of why I've always wanted to include sex as part of the story.
Was there anything for you to read when you were 14, or did you have to write early fan fiction?
there was the obligatory Judy Blume, and exactly.
A lot of love for
Judy Blume love. But beyond that, not really. I just had to use my imagination.
Well, that's the fun thing with the internet. We never need to use our imagination.
Yeah, so, and it wasn't very good.
Now we have to be careful with Beth, because Beth's father is in the audience. We have to bear this in mind. Sorry, I'm so sorry, Beth's dad. So, now Beth, am I right in thinking you would have been about 16 when you started writing The Kissing Booth, is that right?
Yeah, I was 15 when I started writing. Can you guys hear me at the back okay? Or do I need to shout?
Tilt up.
Can you hear me now? Yeah? Well, I was 15, well that's better. I was 15 when I started writing my first book, and you know, it's got kind of a fade to black sex scene in it, so there's no graphic detail or anything. But, you know, I was reading teen romances and there wasn't really any sex in it, much of those. And I kind of thought, well, I'm at a school where I know teenagers who have had or are having sex, and, you know, it happens, so why aren't people writing about it in their teenagers' stories?
It makes sense, and I think in different ways, all three of the panelists, you write about sex in a very sex-positive way. you leave the judgment at the door. No judgment. I think that's fantastic, and I would like to see that throughout YA fiction. Because as you said, young adults are having sex, why would we want to be judgmental about that? But that said, although you are all broadly sex positive, you approach it in very different ways. In Entangled and Undone, we're dealing with some quite dysfunctional sexual relationships, I think it'd be safe to say. Beth tackles it from a much more first love, romantical kind of way. Romantical is a word I just invented. I'm a queen, what are you going to do? And whereas no spoilers, but the sex, it's a major plot point, it's a big part, it drives the whole story forward about the secret identity of who's having sex with who. So, my question is, what's the process behind writing a sex scene? I'm about to write my first ever sex scene, so I want to know, what's the process? How do you approach it? How do you get in the mood? Do you buy yourself a flower? Do you run yourself a lovely bath? I mean, how do you get yourself in the mood for writing a love scene? And we're going to start with Beth.
Well, like I said, I was 15 when I wrote this kind of fade to black scene because, I didn't have any experience at that point to write a graphic scene. And I didn't really want to either because I was aware that where I posted my book online at first, I knew I had younger readers and I didn't want to make it inaccessible to them. So I kind of avoided any of that. And like you said, my sex scene was more romantic. So I didn't buy myself a flower or anything, but I would read romance novels and I would watch chick flicks and romance movies. So that helped.
So do you think? And I think in yours it's true. Do you think there is an element of sort of wish fulfillment, how every young girl hopes their first sexual experience will be kind of?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was the kind of book I wanted to write as well, so I almost did it on purpose.
No.
I kind of went the other route. I have a graphic sex scene in my book, which I think is quite important on the grounds that...
Fantastically realistic as well.
Well, yeah, because the thing is, as I said, I write for horny, curious 14-year-old non. And so she needed to actually find out what happened. So I wrote it. Getting in the mood, I think I just sort of hammer it out. It's not awesome choice of word there.
Thank you. Twitter, non-crowd. Hammers it out.
Hammer it out. I actually, like the way I write the scenes I like the best first. So I write fight scenes, I like drunk scenes, and I like sex scenes. Those are all the best bits.
Thank you.
So I wrote those first. I think I just had fun.
Now, Kat, we do always say you should never go to bed angry, but what I love about Undone in particular is that it's a girl on a revenge mission, and she quite literally uses sex as a weapon. So, I mean, how did you approach that?
Well, in general, to write a sex scene, I have a Sexy Times playlist.
What's on your Sexy Times
playlist? In the
playlist?
mood. Well, actually, I asked Twitter what got them in the mood, and I created a playlist. There are some dirty people on Twitter, let me tell you.
So what's on our list? Can you give us some choice cuts from your list?
There's quite a lot of Prince.
Yeah, we imagine, yeah.
It's pretty standard. And then there were some weird ones that I didn't put on, so I'm like, really? Rod Stewart doesn't really get me going. Oh gosh, I'm just going to say things I don't want to. The sex in Undone is a tool for revenge, but the main character Jem still likes it. It's sort of killing two birds with one stone, as it were.
Have you ever done revenge sex? So I know I've known Kat for years, so this is just such an opportunity.
No.
Why is it? Now this is, again, thinking back to my experience in America with Say Her Name. Why do we think that in 2014, we've had 12, 15 years of reality TV now, why do we think sex is still so taboo, especially in young adult fiction? And can we start with Lovely Not?
I would just say fear is actually the thing that creates the taboo here. I know we will be talking a little bit about gatekeepers and people who monitor what teenagers are reading. Ultimately, teenagers have a lot of buying power, but they are still monitored by their parents to some degree, because that's where the money comes from. Parents do not like to think about their children having sex.
children don't like to think about their parents having sex either.
Yeah, no, yeah, it goes both ways. But the one thing that I was saying here is, teenagers aren't children, and I think you really have to think about that as a parent. You have to accept that of all the things that your teenager can be doing when they're a teenager, all of the dangerous things that they might do, like drugs or drinking or fighting, sex is the only thing you actually want a teenager to do once they are an adult. It's actually something you think people should enjoy. I don't really understand why you would want to be frightened of that.
Kat, what about you? Why is sex? As I suppose with YA we're dealing with sex, swearing, violence, but sex in particular seems to upset people. Why?
I think it only upsets people in books for some reason. I think a lot of parents don't have a problem with their kids watching Game of Thrones, for instance, or movies with quite graphic sex scenes, but there's this idea that books need to be good for you and sort of worthy in a way, and people don't associate sex with that. And I think that idea is crazy, and we need to get over it, because books are primarily entertainment, I think, for a lot of teenagers, especially reading outside of the school curriculum. You don't really want to be reading. Some people want to be reading, Wuthering Heights and Dickens in their spare time, that's fine, but some people just want to relax and enjoy themselves and be entertained.
With a romance novel. Beth, what about you? Why is sex considered taboo?
I think with sex in YA, there's a big issue with the YA readers being younger and younger. So, you've got like 11-year-olds reading our books. And, you don't necessarily want to expose 11-year-olds to that kind of, those sex scenes and sexy times, because they don't really understand it just yet necessarily, and they might not have the education required to know what's going on. So I think that's partly where the taboo is, and that's why a lot of parents have an issue with it.
I have the same thing with being a boy. And the first people anybody ever asked me about being a boy, which is a sex education guide for young men, how old should a child be? And well, puberty can kick in at 9, 10, 11, 12. I don't think there is a right age, and I think the word that we've used and non-used is the word curious, and I think we can either leave young people to the mercy of the internet and Google, or we can actually give them books like ours, which present sex in a non-judgmental way that gives young people an opportunity to think about it and ask some of those big questions about getting older without having to watch hardcore pornography, which I think none of us would really want 11-year-olds to see. So I think far better to read a novel than it is to ask somebody on the playground where they will be told the wrong answer. So that's always been my thing.
So also, can I just say, I don't know that anybody has ever gone out and had sex because they read about it in a book.
Oh, I did.
Okay, sorry.
I did revenge.
The exception.
How I got revenge on Kat. But one word answer, speedfire round. In one word, would you put age ratings on books?
No.
No.
No. Moving on. Okay, what are you looking at? Just copying, yeah. What are, briefly non-mentioned word, gatekeeper? Now this is not like in Ghostbusters with Zool, although it would be great if it was, Zool. I like the idea that Zool works at Wardstone's head office. No! God. But a gatekeeper, if you have just stumbled in from the standing queue, we talk to gatekeepers about we mean editors. They've got the power to say no to our books. Sales teams who think they might not be able to get it in bookshops. We've got booksellers themselves who say no, we won't be selling that filth. And then particularly librarians and parents who won't put our books in their libraries and won't let their young adults read them. So that's what we mean when we say gatekeeper. So, panel, what are your experiences with gatekeepers? And we'll start with Kat.
I've been really lucky. I've heard a lot of horror stories from other authors who've had to take scenes out of their books at the request of their agent or editor. I've never had to do that. I was going to say touch wood, but I don't think that's really appropriate. Hammer it out. Yeah, I've been really lucky. I've written some things that I was quite sure I would have to take out. There's a particular line in Undone during a scene with oral sex, and it's a line that I wrote, and I was cackling while I wrote it. And I'm like, this is never going to stay in, but this is so much fun. And nobody said a word. I was quite disappointed. I wanted to fight for that scene, but I didn't have to. I'm trying to think. I didn't have any problems being published in America. They didn't change any of the content. So I've been quite fortunate. I've heard a lot of horror stories.
I was talking to Sarah Manning yesterday. Sarah Manning's on this afternoon on the Girls Doing It For Themselves panel, which is not about sex. And Sarah has had huge issues with schools, and now she's almost said now that going into schools just isn't worth it because parents get so cross. Beth, what about you? Has anybody said anything?
I'm very guilty of going on Goodreads and having a look at some of the
Oh,
reviews.
you never go on Goodreads.
I know, but I know. But on there I've noticed, it's sort of middle-aged women and parents on there saying, "Oh, I wouldn't let my child read this book." But then you get like people commenting and saying, "Oh, I'm 12 and I read this and I absolutely loved it and it was great." And they don't have a problem with it. And I haven't found like the librarians have had a problem with it. It just seems to be the occasional parent saying, "Oh no, my child will never like something like this." And I think that's just parents being in the dark about their children.
Because no parent wants to think about it. But yeah, it happens. Non, what about you? You're also being published in America. Any problems?
Nope. No, I went in thinking that there might be a problem. Pretty graphic sex scene. And when I met with my publishers, our first meeting, I was like, I'm not changing the sex scene. It's the only thing I'm not doing. The editor, she's actually here. She just went, we weren't going to. Oh. And then actually what's happened is that they put the moment of conception on the front of my book. So my publishers are really behind the sexy. If you find sperm sexy.
I know I do.
We all know that, James. I think actually there's a perception that publishers, librarians, booksellers have problems, but as Beth said, it goes back to parents. The only negative experience I've had so far is I approached a school asking if, approaching them saying, I'd like to do an event, here's a bit about my book. And the librarian, being fantastic, doing the job well, reading the book, she emailed me, she said, I'd love to have you come in, not entirely sure we can have you sell your book to our students, because we don't have, I think it's like a V1 form or something, which basically she's just like, parents might object to this, we're not sure that you can do that. But it was mostly based on religious grounds, she suggested, which I thought was quite interesting. I don't believe there's any religion that says you can't read about sex.
No, I think, yeah, and I know obviously in America they have far bigger problems with banned books being challenged, a challenged book on the grounds of very often it does come down to religious groups, and that maybe goes back to the previous question about why is sex still taboo, because of course sex is just for reproduction, as we all know. But, now I'm going to aim this one at Beth first, because when I was Googling Beth to prepare this interview, there was one that said it was 50 Shades of Teen was levelled at the kissing booth. And I think 50 Shades, it has its detractors, but I think it's done wonders in really lifting the lid off the erotic novel as a thing. It's sold and sold and sold. Now Cat was published before 50 Shades, but Non and Beth have been published since 50 Shades. And I wonder if, Beth, if you felt you owed anything to 50 Shades, or has it made a difference to the kind of books that are being written?
Well, I'd written my book before 50 Shades, but it was published after 50 Shades, and I think the difference was that 50 Shades had sort of lifted a lot of the taboo away from sex in books and people reading these sexy books. And I think women would have made a difference. Yeah, I think that would have made a difference. Yeah, but the 50 Shades of Youth title that was on the newspaper, I think I preferred being called the Dickens of the iPad generation.
Better, I'll give you that. Kat, any ideas on 50 Shades? Have you read it?
I read a couple of pages, and it's not really my thing, surprisingly. I'm not sure how much of an influence, well, it hasn't had any influence on me, because I think what we're doing, all three of us, well, four of us, is very different from 50 Shades. 50 Shades is...
I had one job.
I didn't want to use the word titillating, because that word's kind of gross, but that's what it is, and that's not what we do. I mean, I know you write your books for a 14-year-old mom, but it's more just to show it how it is, rather than go, I wouldn't want to read pages and pages of a sex scene in a young adult book, I don't think, especially not 50 Shades.
Well, there's the Danger of Bad Sex Award as well. unlike in Hollow Pike, initially the sex was a bit sexier, and my publisher toned it down because they actually sent me some clippings from the Bad Sex Award, and my editor said, you have to be very careful, and it was about kissing with tongues, so it wasn't even sex, but apparently the description of the tongue had made somebody not put somebody off their yoga or something, so that's why I actually did trim some sexy bits.
I want to read those off
Yeah,
cuts.
And any thoughts? Because actually, non-sex is very real. It keeps it quite awkward, almost. Actually, the antithesis of 50 Shades, which is quite fantastical. So, any thoughts?
I don't like to use this phrase, but I can't think of another one. I think there has been a trickle-down effect from adult publishing to teen publishing. In that, as Beth said, it's kind of lifted the taboo. I saw an Asda advert, I'm sure I shouldn't have just advertised Asda, in which it was a Christmas advert, and they were like, oh, opening all of our presents. And then there's Gran sitting in the corner reading 50 Shades of Grey. I'm like, socially acceptable to read erotica at a family gathering. So I do think like it's kind of like people are maybe like, well, I'm reading about sex, maybe it's not so bad if my daughter or my son or they sniffy or whatever is reading about sex. I don't know.
A lot of 14-year-olds were reading 50 Shades.
Yeah.
We know this. Some of them didn't bear with it, some of them did. And I think whatever people think about 50 Shades, it is that thing of socially acceptable. And I think actually anything that empowers women to talk about sex is a positive thing. So I think it probably is a good thing. But now we have a final question, and now it's going to get dark, because I want to know, we've tackled angry sex, awkward sex, romantic sex, teen sex. Are there any taboos you wouldn't approach? Is there any way where you wouldn't go? And we'll start that one with none.
I want to know whether you mean sexual taboos or general ones.
No.
Let's start with general ones. Generally, I don't know that I'd feel particularly good writing a book that is very religious. I don't know very much about very many religions. I think I would not be the right writer for that, so I probably won't do that. Beyond that, I can't think of anything else. Sexually, I don't know if I can say stuff. Anyone here read The Lemon Grove? There's quite a lot of the alternative toe use in The Lemon Grove. And one of the things that I thought of, one of the things that I kind of find, I was talking to Rachel Morris, who's the Cosmo sex expert, and she was saying that the way the internet is now, you've got like a massive tasting menu of like all the possible things that you can do with your body.
Where is this going?
And she was just saying like it's now like a tick menu for teenagers to just be like done that, done that, done that, done that, done that, done that. And actually I think that for heterosexual sex, I think you should get good at the vanilla variety prior to moving on to other options. So I don't think I would necessarily encourage that outside of this conversation.
Beth, anything you wouldn't tackle?
General taboos, a bit like Non said with religion. I'm not religious, and I probably wouldn't write a particularly religious protagonist. I'd also be a bit wary of having a protagonist dealing with depression because I would be worried about that coming across in the wrong way. Sexual taboos, I mean, I know I have a lot of younger readers and 12-year-olds, 11-year-olds reading my book, so I would be very wary of doing anything particularly graphic sex-wise in my books because that would make it inaccessible to them, like I said earlier.
The gatekeepers, that's when the gatekeepers sometimes step in.
Yeah.
Kat, anything you wouldn't do? All right! Sorry.
Thanks, James. I was just still thinking of the phrase alternative home use. I think that's going to be the phrase.
Well, we've got a title for your new book now, basically. We've been working very hard to think of a new title.
I can't wait to see the cover. I'm not sure there's anything I would tackle. Torture-y stuff is a bit icky to me. I don't like any films with it. It really, freaks me out. So I probably wouldn't cover that. But that would just be because I don't really want to write about it, not because I think I shouldn't. I honestly can't think of anything else, probably because I lack imagination. maybe you should ask us if we would cover something, and then we can say yes or no. We can tick them.
Well, I think one of the last taboos, and something that it's probably, if you can think about it, it probably means somebody's writing about it as we speak. But I think I would be really interested to read a book about asexuality. Because I think in the quest to push boundaries sexually, actually one of the last taboos we have is young people who aren't having sex and don't want sex and actually opt out of sex. And I think that would be a really interesting thing. So maybe the next boundary of sex is no sex. But I don't know, that's just something that I thought about. And I think, just as a final word, all the sex in these books, very positive, very, very, very well written, very real, and that's something that I really, really like. These are books that I think we can all in some way identify with. That's the end of my bit. But I'm really hoping that we've got lots of questions. Now, questions are going to work like this. If you have a question, we need to ask you to be really brave and sort of come down the aisle, form an orderly queue down the side, and I've got to sort of hand you the mic, as it were. So do we have, I've not got my glasses on, so you really do need to wave at me. Hands up if you would like to ask a question of our panellists. Hooray, Bex, please come down the front. Come on down. And I'm going to come on down as well. Hello, hi there, what's your question?
If you could go on a date or more with any fictional character, who would it be and where would you go?
I have an answer. It probably would have been a different answer half an hour ago, but now it would be Cersei Lannister. Because I just weed next to her in the green room.
Next to her?
And then we chatted and I said the word we. It was really good. So we probably go somewhere other than the toilet. Maybe a nice restaurant.
I feel like the age gap might be an issue, but I wanted to go on a date with Neville Longbottom. Dude, I love Neville! Oh, yeah, although I do also would like his incarnation to be grown up like Matt Davies. He's quite attractive.
I was trying to think who Game of Thrones and Harry Potter characters as well, actually. Maybe like Fred Weasley, George Weasley, one of them. Which one? Well.
The not dead one, you know? Spoilers, sorry.
Okay, maybe it's George. Yeah. But yeah, so I just think they would be a riot, and I think it's laughter is a really important thing to get on with someone and being able to joke around with them.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, my son let me Finnick from the Hunger Games because he's a really good boyfriend as well as Finnick. Not to mention Humphrey. Yeah, so we'll go with Finnick. Excellent. Thank you. Who's next for a question? Come on down. What's your question for the panel?
It's about taboos and whether the new category of new adult is a way of getting round taboos and gatekeepers. I have a novel in progress which involves young bisexual women, one of whom sells sex part-time to fund her studies, and I don't think the school librarian is going to particularly like that, but do you think the new adult category kind of makes a place for those kind of discussions?
That's basically my autobiography, by the way. That's just ripped from your life. Panel, because I was going to ask about new adult and I forgot, so thank you. You answered my questions. What do we make of new adult? Nom, do you want to?
I do believe in new adults. I mean, I know that it's on the shelves, but I think it's more like a marketing tool than an actual separate piece of literature. I think that actually a lot of what is included as new adults is actually just young adults with sexy times. So I don't find it very helpful. I would just prefer to just be like, it's young adults and it's just for a slightly older young adult. That would make me happier in terms of branding.
I mean, I think that the new adult thing just basically labels the books for any gatekeepers. Like, this is a young adult book, but it's got more mature content, so you gatekeepers might want to be careful about giving it to some of the youngest readers. But, I don't really know what to say about that.
When I first heard about New Adult, I was really excited because I thought it was going to be stories about kids going to university, which I've always wanted to write. And I wrote one for NaNoWriMo a couple of years ago, and I think that's a really interesting point in people's lives. But that's not what New Adult turned out to be.
The schools not liking it. It's not like it would accidentally sneak into schools if it was sold as YA, because schools and school librarians, this is why we need libraries, this is why every school needs a librarian, they read the books. They wouldn't accidentally give it to an 11-year-old.
But if you do want to go into schools, you might want to tone down some of the sexy times, because I think that might be a problem for school visits.
Maybe don't do the reading where she first sells sex. Maybe that's not for year 8, is it? So, thank you. Come on down. Hello, thank you for being brave. What is your question?
I was just going to say, I've really enjoyed James, your books and Kat and Non. I haven't read yours yet, but sorry. I've heard they're really good. So I was just going to say, if someone has read all of your books, who would you recommend they read next?
Ooh, good question. The question was, if you've enjoyed our books, who would you read next? Kat, do you want to kick us off?
Usually, if people come to me looking for recommendations, I recommend Courtney Summers, who is an amazing Canadian writer who I adore everything she writes. The first couple of books are contemporary, young adult, and the last one was Zombies, which is just utter win. And also Laurie Holt Anderson, who I know Dawn is a huge fan of. Maybe you want to talk more about her?
Laurie House Anderson was the first YA I ever read, and she's a fantastic author who was writing for real teenagers ahead of really anybody in the UK, certainly, and I'd say at the forefront of the US. Go and read Speak, that's the book. That's quite dark. Laurie House Anderson's pretty dark. Actually, the author that I would recommend, if you like the sort of warmth and the heart in what I've written, I would maybe suggest reading an author called Liz Banks. I would start with her second book, which is Undeniable, which is my favourite, and I actually snort laughed in the middle of McDonald's. It's absolutely fantastic. Ignore the very serious cover; it's hilarious. Or Lila Sales, this song will save your life.
I'm going to say Sarah Gettin, along the same sort of lines of Courtney Summers. She deals with some quite heavy issues in a really, really good way, and her books are absolutely fantastic. I can't rave about them enough. John Green, Stephanie Perkins, Maureen Johnson as well. I think her books are fabulous.
Yeah, it felt for a long time I was the only person sort of doing teen horror, so I felt a bit cold out there. But I'm noticing there's more and more sort of teen horror sort of starting to come through now. There's a book out next year from Orion called The Dark House. Dave Shelton's new book is a ghost story anthology called 13 Chairs. So yeah, I hope there is. I would encourage a lot more sort of supernatural teen horror. And actually Maureen Johnson's Shades of London are great as well. Who's next? Hand, come on down. Again, I can't see you, but there's a hand. What's your question?
As a library assistant who works with predominantly teenagers.
Gatekeeper.
Exactly. I've only been doing it for 2 years, not particularly experienced. Want to be able to give books like these to the kids, but the gatekeepers above me are too terrified of, parents. They want to, it's a difficult boundary. How do you approach giving people that topic without offending their parents, without saying, just read this behind their back, just don't tell them? That would be my approach.
That would be my approach.
Any other tips? How do we get books past gatekeepers?
I suppose, yeah.
I really wish there was a way of talking to parents and reassuring them. I actually think this is why I wanted, a con like this is really good, because we've got teenagers in the audience, we've got adults who read YA, and I think we've probably got a few parents as well. And I think it's quite good to just realise that we're not out to corrupt children. We're out to help teenagers. I think you have to just kind of be honest and be like, there is a sex scene in this book. it's about teenage pregnancy. It would be really hypocritical if it wasn't. So,
Now I've got a question, because Beth and Non, your sex is quite, it's advertised, I guess, in the blurb, kind of they're about relationships. Kat's, yours less so. Was there more shock about the revenge sex, because it was outwardly a book about sort of revenge rather than sex?
No one's told me they were shocked. I've just remembered I did have a problem with a gatekeeper. I forgot.
She got there in the end.
I'm quite slow. My old agent had a problem with me going to talk to 11 and 12-year-olds. Not sell them books, but to talk to them. And I think she was worried that I was going to corrupt them in some way. Like I couldn't do a talk about writing without shouting obscenities. But I did manage to talk her around. But I don't think you really can. I think you're kind of bound by the fact that parents can tell their kids can influence their kids reading, can tell them not to read. So I think if you can find a way to talk to parents, you can have a bit of, like during parents' evening or something at your school. Oh, it's public.
Librarian, but I also work with school children.
Oh, well, if it's like, maybe you can like put them in sort of brown paper packages under the counter. That can work.
I know with being a boy and this book is gay, I wrote the last chapter of each of those titles is guidance for parents on how to use the book. We knew right from the get-go that young boys, 11-year-old boys, were never going to buy Being a Boy, but we really hope that mums would. And actually it's mums who buy it, and you read the chapter first about how to use the book as a medium for broaching puberty and sexual relationships. So my approach is to engage parents, don't see them as the enemy, to actually say, right, these are some books that might help you talk with your young person, because actually I don't think parents look forward to the talk, so actually anything they've got, any help, any guidance, any armour can only help.
It's really difficult for me because my parents weren't gatekeepers at all. They let me read whatever I want, and I learned about everything very early, but I was very, very healthy about it, and I want other teenagers to have that experience, but it is difficult when they do have the gatekeepers, and being seen as one as well. So parents expect you to reinforce the sort of the gates that they're setting up as well as a professional.
I think we've got time for maybe one more question. Yes, hand over there. Come on down.
Well, I wanted to ask this because this is something that I've noticed that's very underrepresented and not talked about a lot. We see a lot of sex scenes when they do pick through, but LGBT sex.
Now you talk.
We don't see that a lot. And even when you have the LGBT characters, you don't see them have sex a lot. In this one, Graham is still that controversial.
Can I start that one? Can I do an exclusive, Rosie, about next year I've got 2 books coming out, another horror story and an LGBT love story, which it hasn't been through an editor yet, but there is some very, very sexy sex scenes, which is why I needed to be on this panel, so I've had to learn. So, and I think next year there are a lot of LGBT YA books coming out, in fact quite a slew actually. But yeah, any ideas about why we're not seeing, maybe is that taboo? Is it still taboo to do gay love scenes?
No. Well, I've got gay and lesbian love scenes in my books. I think this year particularly and next year we're seeing quite a lot of LGBT books coming out. I saw Liz Kessler in the audience there. Her young adult book, Read Me Like a Book, is coming out next year. So I think this is the time, really. But I'm worried about it coming up as a bit of a trend.
Yes,
which means it will go away.
We've all got our LGBT book now, brilliant, well done, we've achieved it.
Yeah, tick.
Because I said to Liz, hi Liz again, I tracked Liz down at the Imagine Festival because I knew Read Me Like a Book was coming out and I knew I'd written my one. And I apologised to Liz and said, I'm so sorry, I feel like I'm treading on your toes. And she said, you're being ridiculous because we wouldn't be having this conversation about straight books. It's only because we've both done 2 girls getting it on that we're even having this conversation, whereas every book on every shelf in every bookshop is straight characters, so why shouldn't we have a shelf full of gay characters as well? Preach.
I mean, for me, I don't have a problem if I was to write a book with, LGBT characters as the main characters in a love story. But like I said earlier, I don't really feel comfortable writing graphic sex scenes to my readers, so that's why I wouldn't personally do an LGBT love, sex scene. I wouldn't mind doing it as a love story though, because it's no different to doing it as a straight story.
I had to do heterosexual sex because she gets pregnant.
What?
I know, God, who imagined that's how it works? But having said that,
With the alternative hole, does that not work?
apparently not. What I would say though is that it's like I fully intend to write whatever's right for the characters, and I definitely don't think it's off the board for many future novels. I hope it's not a trend, because it's not a trend to be LGBT, therefore it should not be a trend in publishing, it should just be.
Well, thank you very much. And we might have a very quick last one. We do, very quick last question. Yes, hand in the middle, yes. Come on down. We're going to have some quick fire answers to this one. We have like a minute. Hi, what's your question?
Someone said earlier about how, as a taboo, sex is often lumped together with violence. I had no kind of guiding force when I was younger and reading, so I read about sex and I read about violence quite early. I was always a lot more disturbed and affected by the violence, yet it's often treated a lot more casually than sex. Do you have any views on why?
I absolutely agree, because I think there is some book for mid-grade children that's very, very violent, but sex and swearing is a no-no. Why is it that we can get away with violence but not sex then?
I think because people get into fights in school and they might hit each other and be a bit violent, whereas kids in school will not be swearing, they won't be having sex because that is what their parents tell them not to do. But their parents, if they get in a fight, they slap on the wrist and their parents are like, don't do it again.
I think maybe it's also just like as you said, like you've seen people being violent at each other, whereas by and large sex is something that happens, I was going to say in the bedroom, but wherever, but usually quite private. Usually. So I think maybe violence is more visible, so people are sort of, I don't say inured against it. I'm very bad with words actually, I don't know if that's the right word. But they don't really see it as much anymore.
I think it's sort of ridiculous that a lot of parents are fine with the violence in the Hunger Games, say. I mean, I love the Hunger Games, but kids killing kids, and it's very graphic in the Hunger Games. And to not have a problem with that, but to have a problem with a sex
Say her
scene.
name, yeah, because it's the same publisher who did say her name.
Yes, good point. I think it's ridiculous, and I think it needs to change. Sex is a good, nice thing that lots of people do and want to do. Violence isn't.
There you go, thank you. I hope that answers your question. Right, that's time. We are all now being whipped over to a signing session to do nice signings. I hope we'll see some of you there. That would be really, really lovely. But before then, can I have a big round of applause for my sex positive panel, Pat Clark, Monta, and Becky Nicole. Thank you very much.
And for our chair.
There's a lot of love on this.